8 years after Julian Han disappeared, he suddenly reappeared with a pregnant woman at his side. He looked at me indifferently and said, "Vanessa, I want a divorce." He didn't know that 3 years ago, the court had already declared him legally dead. His father had passed away and left all his assets to my daughter. As her guardian, I had been managing the Han family business, and I had already remarried. Chapter 1. When I saw the people standing in front of my house, I froze for a full minute. Julian, missing for 8 years, was facing away from me, seemingly trying to figure out the door lock. The woman next to him, her belly slightly rounded, happened to glance back and saw me. She quickly tugged at his sleeve. Julian turned to her with a smile and asked her something softly. She murmured a response, reminding him of something, and only then did Julian turn around. The moment he saw me, the tenderness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold sharpness. Neither of us spoke. The air between us grew strangely heavy with tension. In the end, Julian broke the silence, shockingly, with a tone full of accusation. "Vanessa, why did you change the passcode? The door code used to be the date of our wedding." I studied his face. After 8 years, he looked far more mature, though his eyes still carried that same naive arrogance. He was still handsome, but his complexion and skin looked worn. His clothes didn't fit well and showed no visible brand. Clearly, life hadn't been kind to him. The woman timidly tugged on Julian's sleeve again. He reached out and held her hand, clearly trying to comfort her. A mature and handsome man, a gentle, innocent-looking woman, truly a picture-perfect couple. If I had been a woman who spent the last 8 years waiting for her husband in anguish, this moment might have shattered me. Luckily, I wasn't. This house was originally Julian's property. I frowned slightly, but stepped forward and entered the new code. Julian watched me press the digits, frowning. 210909. What's that date? Of course he didn't know. It was the date of my remarriage. Chapter 2. Julian and I had a marriage arranged for business reasons. We were childhood friends. He was only a few months older than me. At 22, under the arrangements of both families, we got our marriage certificate and held a grand wedding. A year later, I became pregnant. But before the baby was born, Julian disappeared. Now, 8 years later, as he stepped back into what was once our marital home, there was a fleeting look of disorientation in his eyes. But once he took in the room, he immediately frowned. "This place is a mess. No housekeeper? Vanessa, is this how you've been keeping the house while I was gone? Where's the kid? Shouldn't he be home from school by now? Why aren't you picking him up?" That entitled tone actually made me laugh. The woman beside him looked quite intrigued by the villa. She couldn't wait to go inside and explore, moving with the air of someone who believed she was the lady of the house. "Mr. Han," I said lazily, still standing at the door, "do you even know if your child is a boy or a girl?" He glanced at the woman beside him, his expression soft. "Boy or girl, I'll love them all the same." I nearly laughed in disbelief. I meant our child. He froze for a moment, then quickly recovered, speaking righteously. "The Han family can afford to raise 2 kids. Why are you making such a fuss? Melly naturally loves children. She'll treat him well, not like you, all cold-hearted and calculating." I actually laughed out loud. "Do you even realize, legally, you're already dead?" Julian's expression shifted instantly. "Vanessa, I know you're upset that I've been gone so long, but you can't say something like that." The woman quickly jumped in to defend him. "That's right, sis. I understand you're angry, but Julian has suffered so much over the years. No matter how upset you are, you shouldn't treat him like this." I opened the photo album on my phone and pulled up a picture, showing it to him. It was a death certificate. "Take a good look at it. You died 3 years ago. Julian." Black letters on a white background. Julian's pupils contracted, but he quickly forced calm back into his expression. "Vanessa, what are you trying to prove here?" That amused me even more. I turned my attention to the woman clinging to Julian's arm and casting a defiant look at me. "Julian, who is she?" He hesitated for a second, then looked at the woman. The cold impatience on his face melted like snow in the sun. Gazing at her with tenderness, he said, "You and I were a mistake, Vanessa. It wasn't until I met Melly that I realized what real love is. I never loved you. I love her." I cut him off, annoyed. Full name. The woman spoke in a small voice. My name is Melissa. I gave a nod. Are you pregnant? Melissa's eyes immediately turned red. Her voice trembled. I know it's hard for Miss Lynn to accept that Julian and I are having a child, but what we have is real love. Miss Lynn, the one who isn't loved is the third party. Our child is the one born out of true hope and love between parents. I listened without expression, then asked, so you're saying my child was forced out of Julian by me? Wow, Julian, who would have thought? Your heart may be cold, but your body's burning hot. You even managed to have a child with me. Terrifying. Julian flushed bright red and quickly tried to comfort Melissa. Melly, don't listen to her. I didn't understand love back then. It's only after meeting you that I learned what it truly is. Melly, I only love you. Everything I am, everything I have, it's all for you and our baby. Please believe me. Melissa collapsed into his arms, her quiet sobbing turning into loud weeping. The two clung to each other like they were the only ones left in the world. Chapter 3. As the unwanted third wheel. I let out an untimely laugh. Julian immediately glared at me, demanding, Vanessa, can't you see Melly's pregnant and crying like this? How can you laugh? I looked at him, surprised. Why wouldn't I laugh? It's not like I'm the one pregnant with Melissa's child. Oh, right. I turned to Melissa and said sincerely, Miss, just a friendly warning, you better keep a close eye on Julian. I was 8 months pregnant when he vanished into thin air. I thought he was dead. Turns out, he comes back when our kid's already 8 years old. Makes me wonder, is he a rooster or something? Just drops his seed and moves on to the next hen? Melissa instinctively glanced at Julian, who quickly leaned in to reassure her. Don't believe a word she says. Then he turned to me, eyes blazing. Vanessa Lynn, you venomous woman, are you seriously this bitter about me and Melly being together? I leaned casually against the doorframe. Aren't all ex-wives bitter when their cheating ex shows up flaunting his new fling? Julian shouted, Vanessa, I never knew you were so spiteful. Melly's not some fling, she's the one who should have been my wife. I came back to divorce you, and I mean it. Well, you wasted the trip. I lifted my left hand, flashing the diamond ring on my fourth finger. According to civil law, when someone is declared legally dead, the marriage is automatically dissolved. The surviving spouse is free to remarry, meaning no divorce needed. Julian's face fell. Vanessa, how could you become like this? You think flashing a fake ring will upset me? It won't work. The only one I love is Melly. My own face sank slightly. All these years, and you still can't understand basic logic. Can you? Just then, the screech of car brakes cut through the tension outside. The ones who rushed into the house weren't just the lawyers I was expecting, but also my husband. He rushed to my side, anxiously wrapping me in his arms, checking me over. Are you okay? Did that bastard lay a hand on you? Julian stared in disbelief, his eyes darting from the man to me, his face flushing red with fury. So it is Angelo? Vanessa, when did you two start sleeping together? Did he really think I'd been pining away for him all these years? Hopelessly devoted, waiting for his ghost to come home? Watch your mouth. We're legally married, Angelo said firmly, pulling me closer. He took my hand and raised it. His hand held mine, and on both our ring fingers shone 2 matching wedding bands. Chapter 4. Julian looked like he'd just been hit by a truck. His eyes turned red as he stared at me, mumbling, This can't be true. How could you be so heartless? Suddenly, something seemed to occur to him. He asked urgently, What about my son? Vanessa, don't tell me you made my son take his last name. I gave him a look of pure disdain. What are you imagining? Julian visibly relaxed. I added, Of course he took my last name, Lynn. Julian froze. Melissa spoke up timidly. Miss Lynn, how could you be so immature? Giving the child your last name? That's so disrespectful to Julian. I chuckled. I'm the head of the Lynn Corporation. The child I gave birth to, why would they take Julian's name? Melissa stammered. But it's not the same. Julian's a man. Without him, you couldn't have had a child. I raised my brows. There are millions of men in the world. As the heiress of the Lynn family, do you think I'd be short of options if Julian wasn't around? Julian exploded. You shameless woman. I can't believe I didn't see what a manipulative flirt you are. I smiled sweetly, and I always knew you were as dense as a rock. Angelo couldn't help but chime in. Tiffany's a girl, a beautiful, well-behaved little girl. Hearing that it was a girl, Julian visibly relaxed again. He even took a magnanimous tone. Well, if it's a daughter, I suppose it makes sense for her to take her mother's name. The Lin family needs an heir after all. But Vanessa, inheritance is a man's duty. A girl can't carry on the family line. Look, if you're still upset, let's just not get divorced. Melly's baby is probably a boy. I can register him under your name, and we'll have him inherit both the Lin and Han estates. That way, your family line won't be cut off. Melissa's face went pale instantly. She shrieked. Julian, what are you talking about? Julian turned to her, stern and commanding. Melly, just listen to me. Angelo and I exchanged a look, silently holding back our laughter. Julian still thought I was joking with him. At that moment, the lawyer, who'd been patiently waiting, finally asked. President Lin, may I proceed? Julian recognized him. His face brightened a little. It was lawyer Jean, who had worked with the Han Corporation for years. He turned to me and said, Vanessa, why involve him in this? I already told you, let's compromise. I won't divorce you, and you just change our daughter's last name back to Han. Lawyer Jean remained polite as ever. You're mistaken, young Master Han. President Lin didn't ask me here to handle a divorce. She requested I come to reverse your legal death declaration. Also, we'll need to sort out and return your assets from the current inheritor. Silence fell like a bomb. Julian's eyes widened in confusion. He shouted. What are you talking about? What death declaration? My parents would never have allowed this. Where's my father? Give me a phone, I'm calling my dad. Lawyer Jean, still impeccably courteous, replied. Sir, Chairman Han passed away 3 years ago. Chapter 5. After Julian disappeared, I called the police. That morning, he had gone to work as usual. I didn't realize anything was wrong until his assistant called me. I found out he never showed up at the office. The assistant and I searched all the places he might have gone, asked every friend and relative, but there was no trace of him. As the young CEO of the Han Corporation, Julian's sudden disappearance made us think of kidnapping. His parents and I anxiously waited for a ransom call, but nothing came. Eventually, we chose to file a police report. The police checked surveillance footage around our neighborhood and discovered that after leaving our villa community, Julian vanished. He never entered any other monitored area. It was like he evaporated into thin air. A month later, we issued a public reward for information. The amount was astronomical, which caught a lot of attention, even trended multiple times on social media, but we still didn't receive any valuable leads. At the time, I was 8 months pregnant but still working. After this incident, my in-laws refused to let me continue. They prepared for the worst and began to see this unborn child as possibly their son's only legacy. Julian's father came out of retirement and returned to the Han Corporation to take over the responsibilities his son left behind. I never considered terminating the pregnancy. At 8 months, it wasn't even possible. And with the connection between the Han and Lin families, having a child as a bond between us wasn't necessarily a bad thing. More importantly, I wanted this child, not just for the Han family's inheritance, but also for the Lin family's. From the moment we married, it was predetermined that our child would inherit everything from both families. In the end, I gave birth to a daughter. By then, my in-laws didn't have the strength to care whether she was a boy or a girl. They lovingly gazed at her soft little face and named her Tiffany Han. I didn't object at the time. Seeing them give her the Han surname only confirmed their approval and their satisfaction with me. Chapter 6. Julian broke down completely. He dragged the lawyer to his father's grave and cried uncontrollably before the tombstone. We followed behind, and his mother, rushing over after getting the news, stood not far away, eyes red with tears. Mom, as if suddenly realizing what he'd lost. Julian clung to his mother's legs, sobbing like a child. Melissa looked deeply unsettled at the sight of mother and son. Angelo and I stood in the back, hand in hand. He leaned toward me and whispered, Tiffany wanted to come see her biological father. I didn't let her. I smiled. Are you jealous? I'm not that petty. He glared at me in mock annoyance. Julian used to be completely unhinged. I was afraid he'd scare the kid. I glanced at him and said nothing. After the dramatic tears, Julian's mother grabbed him by the collar, tears welling up in her eyes as she demanded, "So where the hell have you been all these years?" Julian's sobs stalled. He hesitated, then muttered, "Mom, don't ask." "Of course I'll ask," she yelled, pulling him off the ground. "You abandoned your family for 8 years. 8 years. And from the look of you, it doesn't seem like you were in any accident. You couldn't even send a message home? If your father hadn't insisted Vanessa keep hoping instead of moving on, and now seeing you back with a pregnant woman, how do you think that makes her feel?" Julian tried to defend himself, voice feeble, "But she's already remarried. She didn't wait for me at all." Smack! His mother slapped him across the face. Lawyer Jean leaned over and said quietly to me, "The assets have been sorted out. They're ready to be returned to Mr. Han." I nodded. I had long prepared for Julian's possible return. I'd managed his assets separately, and over the course of 8 years, doubled them. His wealth still partially belonged to my daughter, so I had no intention of hiding or withholding any of it. His mother was shaking with fury, her voice raw from screaming. "How dare you say that? In the 8 years you were gone, she cared for us in your place and raised your child alone. And you didn't even show up for your father's funeral. Vanessa arranged everything. Where the hell were you?" Julian stammered, but before he could answer, Melissa finally cracked. She rushed forward, knelt before his mother, and kowtowed deeply. "I'm sorry," she said tearfully. "The truth is, Julian took me abroad all those years ago, and finally, from their broken, fumbling words, I began to piece together the truth behind Julian's disappearance." Chapter 7. 8 years ago, while I was pregnant, Julian happened to meet Melissa. He was deeply impressed by her gentle and delicate nature. It didn't take long before the two of them got involved. Julian knew that if he wanted a divorce, neither the Han family nor the Lin family would ever approve. Coincidentally, the Han Corporation was going through a rough patch at the time. The mounting pressure from work was suffocating, and my bloated, pregnant body and short temper made him even more repelled. After much deliberation, he secretly transferred a large sum of assets overseas. Then, he and Melissa planned their escape, avoiding all surveillance, disposing of anything that could reveal his whereabouts, and sneaking into a disguised van. To disappear completely, Julian chose to be smuggled out of the country, while Melissa flew with her passport. After months of detours and sneaking around, Julian finally arrived in the country where Melissa had settled. Melissa had entered on a tourist visa in order to stay and avoid taking responsibility back home. They lived in hiding, but thanks to the money they'd stashed away, life was fairly comfortable, and their relationship remained strong. Until recently, Melissa discovered she was pregnant even though they'd been using birth control. A year ago, their savings had run dry. They were forced to start working low-end jobs, living the kind of love as enough lifestyle people romanticize when they have no choice. After thinking it over, Julian couldn't bear to let the child born of their true love suffer with them. He figured that with this child, he could pressure me into divorcing him. And so, they boarded a flight back to the country. Chapter 8. Julian's mother was shaking with fury. "So just because of that woman and your ridiculous sense of pressure, you abandoned your aging parents and your wife who was about to give birth? You ungrateful wretch." Julian hung his head, clearly ashamed, and tried to defend himself weakly. "Vanessa gave birth to a girl anyway. It's not like she's useful." "Mom, Melly's definitely carrying a boy. We can get married, have the baby, and I'll go back to work at HonCorp. I promise I'll be serious this time. You and Melly can stay home with the child." "Shut your mouth," his mother snapped, cutting him off. "We have only one child in this family, Tiffany. She doesn't even carry the Han name. How is she our child?" Julian sneered dismissively. I smiled and glanced at Lawyer Jean. He nodded, stepped forward, and handed over a document. "Mr. Han, here's your current asset inventory. Please review it." Julian snatched it eagerly and smiled at Melissa. "Don't worry, I can take care of you and our son." He started reading through the list, still smiling, until he got to the end. His face darkened with every line. "That's it? Where's my Han Corp stock? Didn't my father leave me anything?" He turned to me angrily. Did you take the shares my dad left me? I smiled at him calmly. Mr. Han, you seem confused. Legally, you're dead. How exactly was your father supposed to leave his shares to a dead man? Chapter 9. In the 5th year after Julian disappeared, my father-in-law fell seriously ill. Julian had left a mess behind, though my father-in-law brought me in to help. He always remained wary of me. He took on most matters himself, overworked, and eventually collapsed under the strain. With Julian gone, the question of asset distribution became increasingly complicated. Many were eyeing the Han Corporation like vultures circling prey. In the end, my father-in-law made his decision. A dying man spent the last days of his life dealing with the death of his son. After coordinating with various parties, Julian was officially declared dead by the court. His assets were split 4 ways, between his parents, myself, and my daughter. Once that was done, my father-in-law drafted his will and passed away with regret. In his will, he handed over all his remaining assets to my daughter. My mother-in-law was named as the child's legal guardian, but since she had no business sense, all power within the Han Corporation naturally fell to me, including, of course, Julian's share of the estate. Most of Julian's assets were liquid, real estate and cash. Altogether, it added up to a few $100 million, but not much in corporate stock. His father had never gotten the chance to pass the company itself down to him. I always knew my father-in-law clung to the hope that Julian might still be alive, but given the circumstances, he had no other choice. By law, if Julian ever returned, his original assets would still belong to him, but his father's assets were now legally my daughter's. Julian couldn't touch a cent, and since my daughter had always been with me, even if Julian came back, I would likely retain custody, so I didn't object to Julian entering our former marital home. After all, it was once his house. Not long after my father-in-law died, I had my daughter's surname changed to Tiffany. My mother-in-law, to her credit, was understanding and didn't object. She happily accepted the generous monthly allowance I sent her and continued living in comfort. My daughter adored her sweet, simple grandmother, and the 3 of us shared a peaceful relationship. Some people had their suspicions about me, but from beginning to end, I played the perfect victim. The police found no flaws in my account, and my in-laws, knowing the kind of person I was, never doubted me for a second. Chapter 10. Julian was practically foaming at the mouth with rage. A little girl? What's she going to do with company shares? Dad, you must have been out of your mind. He looked like he was about to throw himself at the gravestone in grief, but my mother-in-law stopped him cold with a dismissive glare. The man's already dead. What's with the dramatics? You weren't a good son while he was alive, don't pretend to be one now. Mom, I didn't know he had died. I really didn't know. And if you had, she sneered. What would you have done? Raced home to fight for his inheritance? If she had once harbored a shred of sympathy for her son, it had vanished the moment she learned the truth of his disappearance. Julian's eyes reddened. He looked at her pleadingly. Mom, I'm your son. Can't you show any mercy? She laughed, a short, bitter sound. Julian's eyes lit up for a second. But then came her words. Do you even know whether you're grieving your father, or the fortune he left behind? You were our late-in-life child. When you vanished, your father and I were already in our 60s. We didn't have much time left. And yet you ran off, left us to clean up your mess, just to chase some fantasy of freedom. You didn't care if we lived or died. So why should we care now? As a son, you were ungrateful and disrespectful. As a husband, you were disloyal and cruel. And as a father, frankly, you're inhuman. She looked at Julian with utter contempt. My only regret is bringing someone like you into this world. Julian stood frozen, as if struck by lightning. Melissa broke down, dropping to her knees. Auntie, please don't say that about Julian. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Lawyer Jean, having watched the entire drama unfold, leaned close to me and whispered, Mr. Han may be liable for bigamy, illegal emigration, and foreign exchange violations. But I assume you don't want him in jail just yet? I nodded. Not for now. There's not enough evidence anyway. Take your time collecting it. Start with reversing the death declaration. Let these star-crossed lovers have their wedding and enjoy a few peaceful days. Oh, and when returning his assets, don't forget to deduct my asset management fees and Tiffany's child support. Angelo burst out laughing beside me. I love it when you're wicked in that quiet, elegant way. Chapter 11. Julian Han started pestering me again. Compared to the massive assets of the Han Corporation, the little he got back barely made a dent. It seemed he was now trying to either reconcile with me or fight for custody of Tiffany as a way to claw his way back into Han Corp. So, the next day, when I went to pick Tiffany up from school, I saw Julian standing at the school gate. The muscles in his face twitched when he saw me, but he finally swallowed his pride and walked over, lowering his voice humbly. Vanessa, I'm sorry. I gave a lazy in reply. Julian seemed encouraged and continued. I asked around. You and Angelo don't have any kids yet. I won't hold it against you for abandoning me. Tiffany needs a father. Divorce him. Let's remarry. I smiled. And what about Melissa? Seeing me smile, Julian clearly thought there was hope. He rushed to say, I told you, we'll just register her child under your name. I won't let her bother you. A family legacy needs to go to a son. Anyway, we'll figure out how to transfer Han Corp shares back to me first. Then combine it with Lin Corp and leave everything to our son. He'll treat his sister well. Of course, but you should change Tiffany's surname back. Otherwise, it won't feel like a real family. The boy might feel suspicious. Register the child under my name? What century did this man think he was living in? Medieval feudal China. I laughed and said, Julian, if your face were laid out flat, I bet it could wrap around the entire planet. Julian was stunned. I looked past him and waved at the girl behind. He, thinking I was softening, quickly turned around and said eagerly, Tiffany, I'm your dad. You must have missed Daddy so much, right? He reached out to hug her, but the little girl quickly backed away. Julian assumed she was just shy and coaxed. Tiffany, don't be afraid. I'm your dad. Sweetheart, I said from behind him. Elise, where's Tiffany? Julian froze. Elise immediately slipped past him and ran to me. Tiffany's on classroom duty today. She'll be a little while. Aunt Vanessa, isn't Tiffany's dad Uncle Angelo? Julian had disappeared when Elise was just a baby. Of course she didn't recognize him. In her memory, Tiffany only got a dad when she was 5. Julian forced a smile. Vain. Don't call me that. I didn't even look at him as I slipped a bill into Elise's hand. Elise is my cousin's daughter. Sweetheart, did that strange man scare you? Go buy yourself a treat to calm down. We'll go home once Tiffany's out. Tiffany and Elise were in the same class. My cousin and I took turns picking them up. Since I had something to do that morning, he dropped them off. So it was my turn to pick them up in the evening. Julian muttered, I'm sorry. I've never seen Tiffany before. Tiffany doesn't know you. She only needs one dad, my husband. I stated it plainly, with no emotion. Julian snapped. Vanessa, don't push it. Tiffany's only distant because she hasn't met me yet. Once she does, she'll come around. I'm her real father. I couldn't be bothered to respond. Soon, Elise came running back, holding 2 cotton candies. She handed one and the change to me. This one's for Tiffany. Julian's eyes lit up. He thought he'd found a topic. Tiffany likes cotton candy? Nope, Elise said, shaking her head as she opened the car door and climbed inside, happily taking a big bite of hers. But we always buy 2 of everything at home, one for me and one for Tiffany. She doesn't like cotton candy, so she gives me hers. That way, I get 2 cotton candies. Elise was older than Tiffany, but Tiffany had always been calm and mature. When the 2 stood side by side, Tiffany actually looked more like the older sister. I smiled and gently ruffled Elise's hair. Our Elise is such a clever girl. Chapter 12. Tiffany finally came out. The moment he saw her, Julian froze. Tiffany was an exceptionally bright child. She had inherited the best features from both me and Julian, strikingly beautiful, with a calm, poised temperament that made her stand out effortlessly among her peers. As the future heir to both the Han and Lin families, she made me proud. Julian recognized her instantly. His voice trembled. This is Tiffany, right? I didn't respond. Tiffany paused when she saw Julian. Then, in her usual composed way, she walked over and handed me her school bag. She looked at Julian and asked politely, but with emotional distance, You must be my biological father? Julian was so nervous he didn't know where to put his hands. You know who I am? Tiffany answered with perfect politeness. Hearing about someone 100 times is nothing like meeting them once. Julian had just begun to smile when she added. But meeting you is worse than never having met you at all. Julian's face twisted with urgency. Did your mom tell you something? Tiffany, don't just listen to her side, listen to me. I heard, Tiffany said calmly, that you want my mother to give away my Han inheritance and her Lin inheritance to the child you had with your mistress? She smiled at Julian as she said this, her tone gentle, but her eyes crystal clear, so clear that Julian seemed to finally feel some shame. He stammered, girls should be protected. Spoiled even. I just thought you could take it easy. Let your little brother handle the hard stuff. Tiffany tilted her head slightly. If I don't want to manage the company, I can hire professional managers. I can delegate. Why should I give away what's mine to a stranger? Julian weakly protested. But how is your brother a stranger? Because I don't acknowledge you. Tiffany's reply was crisp and immediate. Julian was completely stunned. I'm ashamed to have even a drop of your blood, Tiffany said with a polite smile. I used to doubt the rumors, but now that I've seen you in person, I can confirm it. My biological father really is a shameless fool. She opened the car door and climbed in. Let's go, Mom. After a few seconds of silence, she looked back, confused. Elise and I were standing nearby, each with a cotton candy in hand, laughing so hard we could barely breathe. Suddenly, Elise noticed something and shrieked. Auntie, you ate Tiffany's cotton candy. Chapter 13. A few months later, I received a wedding invitation from Julian and Melissa. After realizing that getting back together with me was impossible and that he had no chance of winning custody of Tiffany, Julian finally registered his marriage with Melissa. Of course, I didn't attend. What kind of people were they? To deserve the presence of President Lin? I heard the wedding was very modest. Melissa was an orphan, with no family to attend, and my mother-in-law outright refused to show up. After being gone for 8 years, Julian had long since lost any influence over Han Corp, though he still had a few assets. He'd been kicked out of our social circle entirely. Those who received the invitation, once they learned the truth behind his disappearance, felt nothing but disgust. From what I heard, there were just enough guests to fill one table. The MC had never hosted such a lonely, lifeless wedding. His forced smile was painfully stiff. Julian exchanged rings with Melissa wearing a stone-cold expression. He then tried to involve himself in Han Corp again, looking for a position, but things had changed. After 8 years, the company was no longer his playground. Nobody cared about him anymore. He went to my mother-in-law for help. She threw him out. Then he came to me. I simply brought out Tiffany, and a few calm words from her left him speechless and humiliated, running off in disgrace. Later, he even sought out Angelo. That night, Angelo looked at me with mock sorrow. Your ex-husband threatened me. I chuckled and patted his head. My marriage to Angelo was a transaction. Julian's disappearance had been suspicious. I feared that if he was ever legally declared dead, then later returned, our marriage would automatically be restored. I had no interest in going through another divorce, so I needed a legal spouse in place. I've never cared much for romance. After carefully evaluating my options, I chose Angelo and proposed a business-like agreement. Angelo's father favored his illegitimate son. Our deal was simple. I would help Angelo seize power, and he would play the role of my husband. I wouldn't have a second child, and there would be no cheating during our marriage. If he wanted a child, he'd have to wait 10 years. If Julian didn't return after that, we'd divorce. Angelo was smart. He knew marrying a woman with a child would draw gossip, but he didn't care. He agreed without hesitation. But in the end, he still developed foolish hopes. Chapter 14. A few days later, I was at work when I suddenly got a call from reception. President Lin, there's a pregnant woman kneeling at the front entrance asking to see you. I offered to let her in, but she refused. A crowd's gathering now. I laughed. Julian had finally sent Melissa out to do the dirty work. A public kneeling, how perfect for clickbait accounts and gossip-hungry netizens. But honestly, what makes her think she deserves my attention? Call the police. Report her for attempted extortion. Coordinate with the officers. If you handle this well, I'll personally award you a bonus from my account at the end of the month." The receptionist's voice perked up instantly. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, President Lin." A few hours later, my assistant came into my office with the receptionist in tow. It was her first time inside my office, and she was visibly thrilled, trying to keep calm as she detailed Melissa's reaction. Apparently, the police had arrived quickly. The moment Melissa saw them, her expression changed. Her experience dodging law enforcement abroad had trained her to panic on sight. She immediately tried to flee. The receptionist, beaming from ear to ear, grabbed her firmly and all but shoved her into the police car. Melissa stammered for ages, unable to explain why she was kneeling outside Lin Corp. It wasn't until the police brought Julian in that they finally pieced together what had happened from their jumbled accounts. Since Melissa was pregnant, the officers couldn't do much. They gave her a stern warning and let her go. After this public embarrassment, I doubted Melissa would dare try again. I was pleased. At the end of the month, I sent the promised bonus to the receptionist. From what I heard, she nearly passed out when the transfer notification came in. The moment work ended, she dragged her co-workers out to celebrate over dinner. Chapter 15. A few gossip accounts cautiously posted a couple of fluff articles about a pregnant woman kneeling at the gates of Lin Corp, but they stirred up zero interest. Julian flailed around for a while, but still couldn't manage to see me. And again, I say, someone like him? Does he really think he can just show up and get an audience with the woman who controls both the Lin and Han empires? Desperate, he tried his old trick again, waiting outside Tiffany's school to ambush me. What he didn't know was that, due to my busy work schedule, I had long since passed school pickup duties to Angelo. Angelo and Julian nearly got into a fistfight. In the end, Tiffany scolded them both so fiercely that Julian didn't dare show his face again. When Angelo told me the story, I laughed so hard I grabbed my precious daughter and smothered her in kisses. Tiffany only showed her childlike side when she was with me. She wrapped her arms tightly around my neck and called me mommy with such sweet affection. Angelo stood to the side, watching us with a soft smile. Later, I heard that Melissa had given birth to a child with strikingly pale skin, a clear sign of mixed blood. Chapter 16. Julian nearly lost his mind. Even Melissa was stunned when she saw the baby. Under Julian's furious questioning, she finally admitted that back when they were abroad, she'd had a one-night stand with her boss, though she insisted it was during her safe period. Julian looked like he wanted to strangle the baby on the spot. Just then, my mother-in-law walked into the hospital room and barked at him to stop. Julian, eyes filled with tears, turned to her and sobbed. "Mom, I was wrong. This woman's nothing but a whore. I want a divorce." My mother-in-law looked at him coldly. "Isn't this the son you were so obsessed with?" Julian broke down. "No, he's not my child. My only child is Tiffany," my mother-in-law said evenly. "Tiffany's surname is Lin. That doesn't matter. She looks just like me. She's mine." He glared viciously at Melissa. "This is the bastard. I'm divorcing you. I'm going to win Vanessa back." Slap. My mother-in-law smacked him clean across the face. "You don't deserve Vanessa." Julian finally seemed to snap out of his delusions. He collapsed to his knees, wailing. Later, my mother-in-law told me that Melissa had latched onto him like a leech, forcing him to acknowledge the baby. 8 years abroad hadn't destroyed their feelings, but after only a few months back in the real world, they'd turned into bitter enemies. Every time Julian thought about the fortune he'd lost, he burned with regret. At first, he tolerated Melissa for the sake of the child, but once he found out the baby wasn't his, he became violent. Melissa wasn't the delicate little flower she pretended to be, she fought back. But freshly postpartum and still weak, she eventually lost. She was terrified of the police and didn't dare report him. Lawyer Jean told me that Julian had gone to a lawyer friend to notarize a document. He wanted to leave everything to Tiffany. 4 days. Julian hovered around Tiffany's school, not daring to speak to her. I worried he might affect her life. So I told Jean, "It's time, reel him in." Soon after, Julian was arrested. He confessed to all charges without resistance, just so he wouldn't have to see that child again. The evidence was overwhelming. He was quickly convicted and sentenced. My mother-in-law was quiet for a long time when she heard the news. Then she simply sighed and went back to playing with Tiffany. Tiffany giggled sweetly, calling her grandma over and over again. Chapter 17. with Julian finally dealt with. I was in a good mood and invited Angelo out for a meal. Pick a date, I said, lifting my chopsticks without looking up. Let's go finalize the divorce. This marriage no longer served any purpose. Angelo froze, his head lowered, his silhouette shadowed by something unspoken and heavy. At last, he said softly, "All right." I knew he had real feelings for me, but I didn't care. There were no disputes over property. The divorce went through quickly, and we chose not to make it public. Tiffany knew, but she didn't react much. She really was just like me. A few days later, as I approached my car, I noticed a familiar figure. Angelo stood nearby, watching me with careful eyes. He forced a casual smile. "Miss Lynn, may I take you to dinner?" I smiled. Story 2. After my husband passed away, I looked through his old phone. In the saved messages, I found chat records. Every single word mentioned another woman's name, Laura. If not for the family's interests, I wouldn't have even spared Selena a glance. Every time I touch her, I feel disgusted. "You're the only one I love." I stared at those passionate and intimate words, feeling utterly devastated. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day our families discussed the arranged marriage. This time, I chose to let go willingly and decided to marry Luis, his aloof and reserved younger uncle. Chapter 1. In the living room, my father suddenly stood up from the sofa, shocked. "Selena, are you sure you want to marry Luis's uncle?" My tone was firm. "Dad, I'm sure." After a long silence, he sighed. "If you've already decided, then I'll inform Luis's grandfather." After my father left, Luis barged into my house, his urgency evident. "Selena, the doctor said that if Laura doesn't undergo surgery soon, she might not survive the year. When are you going to donate your bone marrow to her?" I stared at him coldly, memories of my past life flooding back. In my previous life, I had been persuaded by his sweet lies to undergo the bone marrow transplant. After the surgery, my body became so weak that I needed daily herbal medicine and could never have children. I sneered. "Donating bone marrow would leave me in constant pain. Are you asking me to trade my life for hers?" Luis frowned. "Medicine is so advanced now. A bone marrow transplant is a minor surgery. It won't cost you your life. Besides, you're about to marry me. I'll arrange the best doctors for you. Laura relies on me completely. I have to take responsibility for her. You understand that, don't you?" I suddenly burst out laughing. "Why should I sacrifice myself to accommodate you?" Just as I finished speaking, a commotion erupted outside. Laura barged in despite the attempts to stop her. With a pitiful expression, she said, "Sister, if you're unwilling to help me, I'll give up on treatment. Just please don't blame Luis." Luis immediately grew anxious. He rushed forward to support the frail-looking Laura. His expression darkened as he turned to me angrily. "Laura is this sick and still came to plead with you. Will you only be satisfied if you push her to the edge?" I tugged at the corners of my lips. I didn't push her into anything. My gaze unintentionally fell on the jade bracelet on Lara's wrist, and my heart clenched tightly. "Why is that bracelet with you?" This bracelet was a family heirloom passed down by my grandmother and was also a token of love between Luis and me. I stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. She trembled and stammered, This. Luis gave it to me. My heart instantly turned numb. In my previous life, I had been blinded by Luis's sweet words and foolishly agreed to the bone marrow transplant. I hadn't even noticed that the bracelet had been given away. It wasn't until I was bedridden from illness that I realized the bracelet was missing. When I asked him about it, he lied, saying he had sent it to a temple for blessings to dispel my illness. Luis grabbed my arm, his face turning cold. "You're so vicious. Getting physical over a mere bracelet with someone who's ill." His grip on my arm was so tight that I had no choice but to release Lara's wrist. He shoved me aside and carefully helped Laura, looking at me with disdain. "You, as the eldest daughter, only know how to bully others without a shred of compassion. How are you any different from a selfish, malicious woman?" After saying this, he bent down, picked up Laura, and left without looking back. Luis was an illegitimate child in the family. As a child, he was often ostracized by the other children in the family. Once, Some cousins pushed him to the ground and threw stones at him. I shielded him with my small frame, enduring bruises and swelling on my arms and back without uttering a single word. From that day on, he stayed close to me, always by my side. If anyone bullied me, he would stand up for me. As we grew older, he confessed his love and promised he would marry no one but me. So, in my previous life, when our families discussed an arranged marriage, I agreed without hesitation, but if I had known his heart would change, I would never have clung to him. Fortunately, heaven gave me a second chance. This time, I chose to let go. From now on, we will part ways, mountains and rivers between us, each to our own peace. Chapter 2. After that day, Lara's condition worsened. Louise stayed by her bedside day and night, taking meticulous care of her. He pulled every string he could, contacting experts for consultations. Bone marrow transplantation remained the best treatment option, and I was the most compatible match for Lara, the best candidate for the surgery. Louise had no choice but to plead with me again, but every time he came, I either turned him away or he left in defeat, met with my cold indifference. Meanwhile, my father had finalized the marriage arrangements with Louise's grandfather. As I busied myself with wedding preparations, Louise appeared before me again, perhaps sensing something unusual about me. He tried to win me over, saying, "Selena, today is our 5th anniversary. Didn't we agree to host a yacht party to celebrate? I've prepared everything just the way you like. Let me take you there, okay?" I sneered. The moment you gave our token of love to Lara, we were already over. That was my grandmother's heirloom. You won't trample on it. If it's not returned within 2 days, I'll take this matter to your grandfather. The yacht party was something I had begged him to organize last month. It was meant to celebrate our anniversary. But now, I no longer wanted to be entangled with him, nor did I believe he had any genuine intent to celebrate. Louise, however, thought I was throwing a tantrum. He suddenly grabbed my arm tightly. "Don't be stubborn. The party is already prepared. You have to come." His face was panicked and anxious. A wave of unease surged in my chest. I struggled desperately. "Louise, let go of me." He ignored my protests, dragging me from the deserted entrance to the roadside. Half pulling, half dragging, he shoved me into a black Bentley. The car sped away and soon arrived at the yacht dock. The massive yacht glittered with lights, but it sent chills down my spine. The deck was adorned with flowers and balloons, and a band played softly in the background. Socialites clung to well-dressed gentlemen, their gazes curious as Louise dragged me on board. I wrenched my arm free from his grip and glared at him angrily. "What exactly are you trying to do?" Louise frowned. "Trying to coax me, Selena. I planned this party especially to surprise you." He paused, then continued. "But Lara's condition cannot wait. I've brought in a top-notch medical team, and they're already in the medical cabin right now. Don't worry, after the surgery, I'll propose to you in front of everyone. Isn't this the unforgettable proposal you've always wanted?" My eyes widened in disbelief. "So, this is the surprise you've prepared for me? Your so-called unforgettable proposal is stealing my bone marrow in front of everyone? Louise, you're truly calculating to the last detail." Louise's expression darkened. "I arranged all of this to give you a chance to salvage your reputation. I don't want others to see you as a selfish, jealous woman who wouldn't save a life when it was in your hands. If something happens to Lara because of you, can you bear that guilt?" I said coldly, "No matter what you say, I won't agree. Don't even think about forcing me." Louise sneered, his face turning icy, and took a step closer. "It doesn't matter if you agree or not. I've already planned everything. I'll make it look like you drowned and died. Then I'll retrieve you quietly and proceed with the bone marrow transplant without anyone knowing." As soon as he finished speaking, Lara walked over, leaning weakly against Louise. Her eyes, however, filled with defiance as she looked at me. "Sister, Louise has already done so much for me. Don't be so cruel to him," she said softly. I was about to reply when a deep rumbling noise came from the bottom of the yacht. Immediately, the ship began to shake violently. Plates and cutlery clattered to the floor as panicked screams filled the air. I stumbled and almost fell, frantically grabbing the railing nearby. Lara, too, struggled to keep her balance. her eyes wide with fear as her body slid rapidly toward the edge of the deck. Louise, taking advantage of the chaos, gave me a hard shove. Then he lunged toward Laura, grabbing her arm and pulling her tightly into his embrace. Meanwhile, the deck beneath me began to crack from the violent shaking. I screamed for Louise with all my might, but he only stared at me coldly and, before my very eyes, pressed a tender kiss on Lara's forehead. Despair consumed me as I plummeted into the icy, bone-chilling ocean along with the shattered deck. The freezing seawater rushed into my nose and mouth. I struggled desperately, glimpsing the scene on the yacht above, Luis tightly holding Laura while looking at me with mockery in his eyes. Then, Luis began shouting my name, feigning panic, and directing the crew to search for me. It looked chaotic, but I knew he was deliberately stalling and sowing confusion. The once lively yacht party descended into chaos. The icy water engulfed me entirely, pulling me into the depths as I struggled. Hatred burned fiercely in my heart. Why is it that even in this second life, I cannot escape his harm? I won't accept this fate. Chapter 3. Just as despair was about to consume me, a figure leapt into the sea, swimming rapidly toward me. His arms moved powerfully through the water, leaving trails of white foam in his wake. As the ocean was on the verge of swallowing me whole, he grabbed my wrist firmly, wrapping his other arm tightly around my waist, and swam toward the surface with all his strength. Gradually, his breathing grew labored, but the strength in his hands never faltered. Finally, he broke through the water's surface, carrying me with him. With the assistance of others, he pulled me back onto the yacht's deck. I was soaking wet, gasping for air, my body trembling uncontrollably. Every breath felt like a knife tearing through my throat, unbearably painful. Before I completely lost consciousness, I saw that the person who had saved me was Louise's uncle, Ethan. Then everything went black as I passed out. When I woke up again, I found myself lying in a familiar bedroom. I slowly opened my eyes, struggling to piece together my thoughts, when Sandra, the housekeeper, hurried into the room. She exclaimed excitedly, "Miss, you're finally awake. You've been unconscious for 10 whole days." And everyone was so worried. I coughed lightly, my throat dry and hoarse. "Sandra, in these past few days, has anything happened? Did Luis come looking for me?" Sandra frowned, hesitating before saying, "Miss, his grandfather came by." I'm not sure what was said, but the master was very upset with him. "And Luis came again today. He's in the living room talking to the master right now." A sense of unease crept into my heart. I dragged my weak body toward the living room. Before I even entered, I heard Luis's voice. "Uncle, you know Selena's current condition. Even if she doesn't donate her bone marrow, her body won't recover fully. Why not do a good deed and accumulate some virtue? Once the surgery is done, I'll arrange for the best doctors to care for her. I'll ensure her health and offer your family substantial compensation." In my past life, after the surgery, I suffered constant pain and sought treatment everywhere to no avail. Luis didn't care for me at all, even despising me because I couldn't conceive. I never thought that in this life. He still wouldn't let me go. My father's voice trembled with anger. "Selena hasn't even woken up, and you're already after her bone marrow? What do you take my daughter for? Don't think I don't know the truth. If you hadn't pushed her, she wouldn't have fallen into the sea." Luis remained expressionless. Lara's condition was critical at the time. I only wanted to save her. It wasn't intentional. Besides, Selena and I had already agreed if she donated her bone marrow to Lara, I would propose to her. Why would I harm her? Before my father could respond, I strode into the living room, staring coldly at Luis. When did I ever agree to that? Seeing me, a flicker of frustration flashed in Luis's eyes. He barked angrily. "Selena, will you only be happy if Lara dies? If you refuse to donate your bone marrow, we'll call off the engagement." His tone carried a hint of threat. I let out a cold laugh. "When did I ever say I wanted to marry you? The person I'm marrying is your uncle, Ethan." Chapter 4. Luis froze, his face full of disbelief. After a moment, he questioned, "What did you just say? You're betraying me?" I sneered. "Luis, you're truly skilled at twisting the truth. From the moment you gave our token of love to Lara, from the times you schemed and hurt me for her, our bond was already broken. My father stepped forward, shouting at Louise with fury. Selena and Ethan's marriage was arranged long ago by me and your grandfather. The wedding is set for a month from now. Who are you to interfere? Louise was stunned at first, then burst into a shrill, mocking laugh. You all conspired to deceive me? That cold, heartless uncle of mine? How could he marry a woman he doesn't even love? Seeing that none of us responded to his words, Louise turned to me, his eyes filled with urgency, seeking confirmation. Before he could speak, the ringtone of a specific call interrupted him. The familiar sound instantly told me it was Lara calling. Whatever she said on the other end of the line made Louise's face darken further. When he hung up, he glared at me with venom. Selena, don't think you can deceive me with lies. One way or another, your bone marrow will end up saving Lara. With that ominous warning, he spun on his heel and stormed out. After Louise's figure disappeared through the door, my father let out a weary sigh. That boy has doted on Lara ever since he saved her from those thugs. I warned you to keep an eye on him, but you swore he would never betray you. If it weren't for his grandfather's sake, I would have taught him a harsh lesson long ago. If he dares to cause trouble again, don't blame me for being merciless. Pausing, my father added, Ethan may be aloof and reserved, but his standing in the family far surpasses Louise. He saved your life, and you should thank him properly. I nodded. I understand, Dad. To be honest, I never expected Ethan to be the one to save me. In my memories, he was like a distant, cold star, commanding respect but impossible to approach. Dragging my still weak body, I freshened up and left for Ethan's villa. On the way, my thoughts were a tangled mess. In the past, I always followed Louise in calling him Uncle Ethan, but now, with my status having changed, I found it hard to adjust. When I arrived at the villa, I pressed the doorbell, and my heartbeat quickened involuntarily. The door opened slowly, and Ethan appeared before me. His deep-set eyes still carried a cold sternness, his posture upright like a towering pine tree. I opened my mouth, hesitated for a moment, and softly said, Uncle, I came to see you. As soon as the words escaped, I regretted them. A faint blush creeping onto my face. Ethan was momentarily stunned. Then, the corners of his mouth seemed to twitch slightly in a subtle smile as he stepped aside to let me in. How's your health? He asked, his voice still cool, but there was an almost imperceptible concern in his gaze. I'm much better now. Thank you, Uncle, for your care, I replied while following him into the house. The faint aroma of tea lingered in the air of the living room, which was furnished simply yet exuded elegance. Have a seat, he said, gesturing for me to sit on the sofa. He took a seat across from me. His gaze rested on me, as if scrutinizing something. Under his steady gaze, I felt a bit uneasy, lowering my head slightly, my hands unconsciously twisting the hem of my shirt. Why did you come to see me today? He broke the silence first. I lifted my head, mustering my courage, and said, Uncle, I came to thank you for saving my life. If it weren't for you, I might have. He waved his hand, cutting me off, leaning forward slightly, his eyes filled with heat and mischief. My fiancé, are you sure you want to remain this distant and polite with me? He deliberately elongated the last syllable, his deep voice stirring something wild within me. Chapter 5. My face burned hot, and I instinctively tried to turn away, but he gently held my chin, leaving me unable to move. Under his intense gaze, I felt completely flustered. After mumbling a few awkward responses, I hurriedly excused myself and left. On the way back, my mind was filled with confusion. Why did Ethan seem so different today? His uncharacteristically intimate actions and affectionate words echoed repeatedly in my mind. I shook my head, trying to clear the chaotic thoughts. No matter what, since the wedding date was set, I should focus entirely on preparing for the ceremony. During this time, Louise was completely preoccupied with Lara and had no energy to bother me. Before I knew it, the wedding day arrived. The day of the wedding dawned bright and beautiful, dressed in a top-tier custom wedding gown by a renowned designer. I waited in the dressing room for the ceremony to begin. Suddenly, the The door creaked open. I assumed it was the makeup artist returning to touch up my makeup. But when I looked up, I saw Luis walking in, his face filled with urgency. He quickly shut the door, sealing off the noise from outside. How can you really marry my uncle? Are you doing this just to spite me? If you agree to save Laura, I'll marry you. Don't you believe me? Luis walked up to me, lowering his voice as he demanded answers. Looking at him, I felt nothing but a sense of absurdity and amusement. Luis, don't you understand yet? I stopped loving you a long time ago. I stood up, putting distance between us. Seeing my resolute stance, Luis's face twisted with anger. He suddenly grabbed my wrist tightly. I won't allow you to betray me. I struggled with all my strength, trying to free myself. In the midst of our struggle, his elbow accidentally hit a nearby vase, shattering it into pieces with a sharp, jarring sound. Luis paid no attention to the mess, continuing to grip my wrist. His eyes filled with obsession. Selena, you can't marry anyone else. You belong to me. I pried at his fingers, shouting angrily, Luis, stop this madness. We're over. As I resisted with all my might, the door suddenly burst open. Ethan entered like a cold gust of wind, his gaze icy and penetrating. He strode forward and forcefully shoved Luis aside. Without hesitation, Ethan's fist shot forward, landing a heavy blow on Luis's face. Luis stumbled to the ground from the unexpected attack. But Ethan didn't stop there. He stepped forward, grabbed Luis by the collar, and spoke in a low, menacing voice. If you dare cause trouble again, I won't let you off easily. After releasing him, Ethan let Luis go, and Luis scrambled to his feet, fleeing in embarrassment. Ethan then turned to me, his previously frosty gaze softening into infinite warmth. He gently cupped my face, carefully checking if I was hurt. Don't be afraid. With me here, he will never harm you again. I smiled and nodded. The soft strains of wedding music began to play. Holding onto Ethan's arm, I stepped onto the flower-strewn aisle. Guests on both sides sent us their warm blessings with smiles, as Ethan and I exchanged rings under the witness of all. Then, amidst the enthusiastic applause and cheers, we drank the ceremonial wedding wine together. When the wedding ended, Ethan led me to the bridal chamber. The room was filled with the faint fragrance of flowers and a subtly romantic atmosphere. Rose petals were scattered across the bed, creating a sea of vibrant red blooms. He gently pulled me to sit on the edge of the bed, his voice low and magnetic. Selena, you know, I've had feelings for you for a long time. Chapter 6. I froze, utterly surprised. Huh? How could you? Ethan gently held my hand, his voice tender and filled with emotion. Selena, do you remember the eerie forest near my family's old estate from when we were children? I looked at him in astonishment as he continued. Though I was born late to my father, cherished and deeply loved, that very favoritism drew jealousy and resentment from others. One day, a few of my cousins tricked me into going deep into the forest. They hurled cruel words at me, calling me a burden to the family. Then, in their madness, they tied me to a tree, placed a wasp's nest right in front of me, and walked away. The wasps buzzed incessantly, their wings a menacing hum as they swarmed around me. I was terrified, utterly helpless. Just when I thought I wouldn't make it out alive, you appeared, swinging a branch. You drove the wasps away. Even as their stingers left your arms red and swollen, you endured the pain, using your young but determined voice to scare them off, and hurriedly untied me. In that moment, you became the only light in my dark world. I tried to recall the memory, then slowly spoke. I think I remember. I overheard them saying something about taking you to the forest and mentioning a surprise and hiding. I thought they were playing hide and seek with you. I decided I'd sneak after them and scare everyone by popping out of hiding. So I quietly followed you all into the forest. But when I saw you tied to the tree with the wasps swarming around, I realized it wasn't a game. They were trying to hurt you. I was so scared. But somehow, I found the courage to save you. I never expected that such a small action from back then would be something Ethan remembered so vividly. To me, it was just one of many childhood memories, blurred over time as the years passed. But to him, it was like an eternal, unyielding light in his life. You don't mean to say you started liking me from that moment, do you? I asked, my cheeks flushing slightly as my heartbeat quickened. Ethan looked at me, his voice soft but firm. I'm not sure when it started. I just know that ever since then, you've been in my heart. I quietly watched your every smile, your every tear, and the emotions I didn't understand at first slowly grew into something profound. Later, when I realized my feelings for you, you were already with Louise. I had no choice but to bury them deep inside. But fate has finally smiled on me, giving me this chance to protect you and cherish the love I've held onto for so many years. As I listened to Ethan's heartfelt confession, my heart raced uncontrollably, my cheeks burning hot. The next moment, his lips gently pressed against mine, filled with an undeniable passion and affection. I widened my eyes, my heart leaping into my throat. After a brief moment of surprise, I gradually gave in to the warmth of his love, closing my eyes and responding to his kiss. At this moment, everything around me seemed to pause. Chapter 7. The next morning, Ethan got up early and carefully prepared breakfast for me. He arranged the delicate dishes neatly on the table and thoughtfully placed a bouquet of my favorite yellow roses in a vase. I walked out of the bedroom, still half asleep, and froze at the sight before me. Ethan looked up at me, his usual stern gaze now filled with warmth and tenderness. Good morning, my wife. You're awake. I nodded and sat down at the dining table. I couldn't help but marvel inwardly. Ethan was clearly warm and attentive, yet he always hid his softer side so deeply that people often mistook him as aloof and cold. After breakfast, Ethan mysteriously said he wanted to take me somewhere. The car slowly drove into a tranquil countryside area, stopping in front of a house surrounded by blooming flowers. When I finally saw the villa clearly, I was speechless with shock. The design was identical to the house from the Crayon Shin-chan cartoon I had loved as a child. It was as if the house had been brought directly from the animation into reality. Selena, when you were a child, you said you wanted to live in Shin-chan's house. So, I had this place built to match that design exactly. I hope you like it. Tears instantly welled up in my eyes. I once thought I had been sincere with Louise, yet he tried to take my bone marrow without a second thought. But Ethan, just because of an offhand comment I made as a child, went to great lengths to make this dream come true for me. If it weren't for this second chance, I might never have known the purity of his love. At that thought, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. Ethan gently pulled me into his arms, resting his chin on the top of my head as he spoke softly. From now on, I won't let you endure even the slightest grievance. This house is your very own playground. Whenever you feel like it, you can come here and relive the innocence of childhood. From that day forward, Ethan stayed by my side every day. He taught me many business skills, helping me manage my company more effectively. We traveled together, riding horses on the grasslands, embracing on mountaintops as we watched the sunrise. Our married life turned out to be even more beautiful and fulfilling than I could have imagined. That afternoon, Ethan and I were in the study organizing our travel photos when the doorbell suddenly rang. A moment later, the butler rushed in, panicked. Sir, young Master Luis is outside causing a commotion, demanding to see the madam. We've tried to stop him, but he won't listen. I froze. After the fiasco Luis caused at the wedding, his grandfather had confined him to house arrest. I didn't expect him to have the audacity to show up here now. He didn't even love me, so why did he insist on disrupting my life? Thinking this, a look of annoyance crossed my face. Ethan gently patted my hand to comfort me. Don't worry, I'm here. With that, he led me calmly toward the door. Chapter 8. The moment I saw Luis, I was taken aback by his appearance. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair no longer meticulously styled, and he looked utterly disheveled. But as soon as he saw me, his eyes lit up instantly. Selena, come with me, he said. The butler quickly stepped forward to block him, his tone firm and righteous. Madam is already married to our master. Why would she leave with you? Luis acted as if he hadn't heard, his eyes fixed intently on me. Selena, weren't you the one who loved me the most? If you agree to leave with me, I'll marry you. I thought his behavior was absurd. I looked at him and said, I'm your aunt now. Stop saying such ridiculous things. Luis, however, wouldn't relent and raised his voice. We were together for 5 years. How can you just let it go like that? You married my uncle to spite me. Don't you know he's notorious in the business world for his ruthless tactics? Aren't you afraid he'll use you and then discard you once he's done? As he spoke, he pulled out the bracelet that had once been my grandmother's heirloom. Look, I've taken back our token of love. Come with me. When he finished speaking, I released Ethan's hand and walked straight toward Louise. Seeing this, Louise's face lit up with excitement, and he smiled widely. Selena, I knew you still loved me. Before he could finish his sentence, I raised my hand and slapped him with all the strength I could muster. The sound was sharp and resounding. His face turned to the side from the force, a bright red handprint instantly appearing on his left cheek. I glared at him fiercely, my eyes blazing, and said each word slowly and clearly. Louise, you're right, we were together for 5 years, but you chose another woman over me, tried to take my bone marrow, and pushed me into the sea, intending to kill me. Louise's face went pale. He stammered, trying to explain. Selena, I was blinded by Laura. She told me she had a blood disease and that only you could save her. I lost my head and couldn't bear to watch her die. But I didn't think about your feelings. After you left, I saw her true colors. She used the money I gave her for treatment to support another man. I saw her being intimate with him in her hospital room. It wasn't until that moment that I realized how foolish I was to hurt you for her. I regret it. Selena, please, give me another chance. At this point, Ethan stepped forward, grabbed Louise's wrist firmly, and effortlessly took the bracelet from him. Turning to me, Ethan spoke gently. My love, I'll find the finest craftsman to cleanse the stain of its defilement before returning it to you. Then, he turned back to Louise, his tone cold and unyielding. If you dare come near my wife again, I won't hesitate to have the family strip you of your name and ensure you'll never have a place in the business world. Hearing Ethan's warning, Louise's face filled with unwillingness and anger. He glared at Ethan, his teeth clenched. Uncle, your tactics in the business world may be formidable, but I won't give in so easily. You took Selena from me, and I'll remember this. With that, he stormed off, his steps filled with humiliation and defeat. Chapter 9. From that moment on, the resentment in Louise's heart grew like wild weeds, spiraling out of control. He began secretly investigating Ethan's business partnerships, attempting to find leverage to sabotage Ethan's projects. He even spread false rumors about Ethan on social media, stirring up doubt among uninformed minor shareholders. At the same time, he started sending me photos and love letters from when we were together, apologizing profusely and trying to reignite my feelings for him. Louise also orchestrated coincidences in places I frequented, begging me each time to give him another chance. One day, as I was leaving a shopping mall and heading toward my car, Louise suddenly appeared out of nowhere. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression a chaotic mix of desperation and pleading. Grabbing my arm urgently, he said, Selena, Lara's blood disease was fake. She bribed the doctor I brought in to fabricate her medical records and test results. That time I saved her, it was all part of her plan. She knew my identity from the start and got close to me on purpose for my family's wealth and power. She knew how much I loved you, so she schemed to frame you, making me misunderstand and turn against you. We were both deceived. I stood there, staring at him, feeling nothing but a mix of mockery and pity. Shaking his hand off forcefully, I said coldly, Louise, even now, you're still trying to shift the blame onto others, whether Laura manipulated you or not. It was you who pushed me into the sea. It was you who tried to take my bone marrow. Those wounds were real, and no excuse of being deceived will erase them. Stop lying to yourself, and stop bothering me. It's over between us. I'm your aunt now. Louise, seeing my unwavering stance, descended further into madness. He began anonymously leaking some internal business information about Ethan's company online. Although it didn't cause irreparable damage, it created a media frenzy and triggered an investigation into Ethan's business. Ethan remained calm and composed. He quickly organized a professional crisis management team to clarify the misinformation, restoring confidence among partners and clients. On the other hand, Ethan secretly launched a counter-investigation into Louise. Finally, Ethan uncovered solid evidence of Louise's collusion with the illegal sources of leaked information. He handed this evidence over to the police. Louise was arrested and charged with commercial crimes. His family completely severed ties with him. In prison, Louise endured cold treatment and harsh conditions. His once glorious life was reduced to endless regret and despair. As for Laura, without Louise's protection, she became a pariah, despised and hunted by everyone. She was wanted by the police for bribing doctors to forge medical records, defrauding Louise of money, and orchestrating schemes to harm me in order to obtain my bone marrow. To evade capture, she fled from place to place. Her former friends, who had once clung to her for her connections, now avoided her like the plague. Her assets were frozen, leaving her penniless and haggard. In the end, during a police raid, she fled in desperation into an abandoned warehouse. The warehouse, long neglected, was in disrepair. As she struggled and ran, a rotten beam came loose and fell, striking her directly. She collapsed in a pool of blood, her life ending in agony and despair, her pursuit of wealth and power through deceit and crime bringing about her tragic downfall. Chapter 10. After learning of Louise and Lara's fates, I sat alone on a garden bench for a long time. Memories of the past with Louise resurfaced, the pain of betrayal and harm still vivid. And Lara, though her greed and ruthless actions were despicable, she was, in the end, a pitiful person consumed by her desires. While I was lost in my thoughts, Ethan walked over and sat beside me. He said, "My love, I had a dream just now. In the dream, you married Louise. He deceived you into donating your bone marrow to Lara. Your health deteriorated. You were tied to daily doses of herbal medicine, and you lost the ability to have children. You suffered terribly. When I finally learned the truth, it was too late. I could only watch helplessly as you passed away. I hated my own helplessness, hated the cruelty of fate. I knelt on a lonely mountaintop, praying fervently with all my remaining blessings, with every ounce of reverence and sincerity I could offer, begging the heavens to give you another chance at life." Hearing this, a storm of emotions rose within me, and tears began streaming uncontrollably. So it was his deep love that moved the heavens and gave me this chance to be reborn. I held him tightly, my voice trembling as I said, "Husband, thank you. You've done so much for me, and I didn't even know." Ethan hugged me even tighter, as if trying to embed me into his very being. His heartbeat was steady and strong. Exhaling softly, he whispered, "My love, thank goodness it was only a dream. Now you're here with me, real and safe. I will protect you for the rest of my life." In his arms, I sobbed quietly, my emotions a tangled mix of gratitude and love. He thought it was just a dream, but I knew it was a painful memory from my past life. His love for me had transcended life and death, spanning 2 lifetimes, and in this life, he stood steadfastly by my side, giving me endless love and unwavering support. To me, he had truly protected me across both lifetimes. How fortunate I was to be loved by someone like him. From that day forward, our lives became increasingly peaceful and happy. Every morning, Ethan would carefully prepare breakfast for me, creating exquisite dishes that perfectly suited my tastes. Watching me eat with satisfaction, he would smile with tenderness and doting affection. After breakfast, we would head to the office together. In my work, through my own abilities and efforts, I managed to lead my family's company to great success. In our free time, we'd curl up on the couch, chatting about amusing stories from work or planning our next trip. We supported and complimented each other, our days brimming with happiness. One ordinary workday, the company suddenly buzzed with excitement. The reason? A trending topic that had gone viral. The cold-faced CEO is actually a wife-doting maniac. It turned out that earlier that morning, Ethan had gently knelt to tie my shoelaces outside the office. An employee had captured the moment and shared it in a group chat. And from there, it spread online. When Ethan saw the trending post, instead of getting angry, the corners of his mouth lifted into a playful smirk, his eyes sparkling with pride. He pulled me into his arms and whispered in my ear, "I can't wait for the whole world to know how much I adore you. For them to know you're my wife." A wave of warmth surged through me. I lifted my head and kissed him. After a long moment, I gently pushed him back, looking into his eyes. and said with heartfelt sincerity, "This life and the next. Through every storm, I'll never leave you."